In the vast expanse of the universe, where stars shimmered like diamonds scattered across an endless velvet canvas, there existed a realm that defied human comprehension. The planet Zarathia floated in the Andromeda Galaxy's outer rim, its crystalline atmosphere refracting light into cascading rainbows that danced across its surface. This was no ordinary world. It was the heart of an ancient civilization that had mastered technology beyond Earth's wildest dreams while maintaining a deep connection to their spiritual essence. The royal palace of Zarathia stood as a testament to this harmonious blend of science and spirituality. Towering spires of living crystal pulsed with bioluminescent energy, their surfaces rippling with patterns that told stories older than time itself. Within these sacred walls lived Princess Elira, the youngest daughter of Emperor Zorvath, whose wisdom had guided their people through millennia of peace and prosperity. Her presence was both ethereal and commanding, her silvery hair flowing like liquid moonlight against skin that seemed to capture and reflect starlight itself. On the other side of the cosmic divide, humanity had finally reached the stars, their primitive rockets giving way to advanced spacecraft capable of traversing light years. Among these pioneers was Captain Marcus Drake, a decorated warrior whose reputation preceded him across the known galaxies. His journey from Earth's military ranks to interstellar diplomacy had been marked by both triumph and tragedy, each battle leaving invisible scars upon his soul. Standing at 6 feet 4 inches with piercing blue eyes that had witnessed countless worlds, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced death and emerged victorious. The convergence of these two beings, one born of celestial grace, the other forged in the fires of human ambition, was not mere coincidence but rather the culmination of centuries-old prophecies whispered among the stars. Ancient texts from both civilizations spoke of a union that would either unite the galaxy in unprecedented harmony or plunge it into chaos. As diplomatic relations between Earth and Zarathia grew more frequent, the stage was set for an encounter that would challenge the very foundations of both societies' understanding of love, loyalty, and destiny. The grand hall of the Zarathian palace buzzed with anticipation as delegates from Earth arrived for what was supposed to be a historic summit. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the assembly, illuminating faces both alien and human alike. Princess Elira stood beside her father on the elevated dais, her regal posture masking the turmoil brewing within her chest. She had heard tales of the human warrior who would be representing Earth's interests, Captain Marcus Drake, whose reputation for tactical brilliance was matched only by accounts of his ruthless efficiency in combat. When Marcus entered the chamber, all conversation momentarily ceased. His presence commanded attention not through any overt display of power, but through the sheer intensity of his being. Elira's breath caught as their eyes met across the crowded space. His piercing gaze seemed to strip away layers of protocol and tradition, reaching directly into her soul. The princess felt an unfamiliar heat rise in her cheeks, a sensation she quickly suppressed with practiced composure. "Your Highness," Marcus began, his voice carrying the weight of authority tempered by respect as he approached the dais. "It is an honor to represent Earth in these proceedings." He executed a formal bow, though his eyes never left Elira's face. The princess inclined her head in acknowledgement, careful to maintain the proper distance between them. Emperor Zorvath observed the exchange with keen interest, his ancient eyes noting every subtle nuance of body language between his daughter and the human warrior. Protocol demanded they maintain professional decorum, yet the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Elira found herself struggling to focus on the formal introductions, her mind racing with conflicting emotions she couldn't quite name. As the initial ceremonies progressed, Marcus's attention remained fixed on the alien princess. He had studied Zarathian culture extensively, knew their customs and traditions inside out, yet nothing could have prepared him for the reality of standing before Elira. Her beauty transcended physical form. It was as if she embodied the very essence of the stars themselves. Every movement she made seemed choreographed by some cosmic force, graceful yet powerful. Elira, for her part, found herself equally captivated despite her best efforts to remain detached. There was something about Marcus's bearing, the way he carried himself with quiet confidence, the intensity in his eyes that spoke of battles fought and won, that stirred something deep within her. But with that stirring came fear, an instinctive recoiling from the darkness she sensed lurking beneath his polished exterior. The formal dinner that followed provided little relief from the growing tension. Seated across from each other at the long banquet table, they engaged in polite conversation about trade agreements and cultural exchanges, all while their true thoughts remained carefully guarded. Elira noticed how Marcus's fingers tapped rhythmically against his glass when he thought no one was looking, a telltale sign of impatience or perhaps nervous energy. Marcus, in turn, observed how Elira's delicate hands trembled slightly when she reached for her drink, though her expression remained perfectly composed. As the evening wore on, the weight of expectation pressed heavily upon them both. They were aware that many eyes watched their interactions, interpreting every glance, every word, every gesture through the lens of potential alliance. Yet neither could deny the magnetic pull drawing them together, nor the shadow of apprehension that accompanied it. The night ended with formal farewells, but as Elira retired to her chambers, she found sleep elusive, haunted by the memory of Marcus's intense gaze and the unsettling certainty that their paths were destined to cross again in ways neither could yet comprehend. Days turned into weeks as diplomatic negotiations continued, each meeting bringing Elira and Marcus closer to an inevitable confrontation. During formal sessions, they maintained their professional facades, discussing trade agreements and cultural exchanges with practiced diplomacy. Yet in the corridors between meetings, chance encounters revealed a different dynamic entirely. Their eyes would meet across crowded halls, conversations would pause mid-sentence, and time itself seemed to warp around their shared moments. One particular afternoon, during a break in negotiations, Elira found herself drawn to the palace gardens, seeking solace among the bioluminescent flora that glowed softly in the twilight. She wandered through the crystalline pathways, her thoughts consumed by the human warrior who had invaded her consciousness. The sound of approaching footsteps shattered her solitude, and she turned to find Marcus standing at the garden's entrance, his silhouette framed by the fading light. "I apologize for intruding, Your Highness," Marcus began, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it in formal settings. "I didn't mean to disturb your privacy." "You are not disturbing me, Captain," Elira replied, her voice betraying none of the turmoil within. "These gardens are open to all guests of the palace." Yet even as she spoke, she felt her pulse quicken, her body responding to his proximity in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. They walked together along the glowing paths, neither speaking for several minutes. The silence between them was charged with unspoken words, each step bringing them closer to truths neither was ready to acknowledge. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "Princess, I must confess something. Since our first meeting, I've been unable to focus on anything but you. It's distracting." Elira stopped walking, turning to face him fully. The vulnerability in his admission startled her, revealing a depth to his character that official functions had masked. "Captain Drake, you must understand that such feelings are inappropriate. Our peoples are still strangers to one another, and I am bound by duty to my people. But aren't we more than just representatives of our species?" Marcus asked, taking a cautious step closer. "I see in you someone who understands the weight of responsibility, someone who has sacrificed personal desires for the greater good. That's rare, Your Highness, and it speaks to me on a level I can't ignore." The intensity of his gaze threatened to overwhelm her carefully constructed defenses. Elira took a step back, her voice trembling slightly. "You speak of sacrifice, yet your reputation precedes you, Captain. The human warrior who leaves devastation in his wake. Is that not true?" Marcus flinched visibly at her words, his expression darkening. "My past is exactly that. The past. You judge me based on rumors and reports, but do you truly know what drives a soldier to make the choices I've made? Do you understand the cost of protecting those who cannot protect themselves?" Their voices rose unconsciously, the emotional current between them too strong to contain. Elira's eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and something else, perhaps fear, perhaps recognition of truth. "And do you understand the burden of ruling with compassion? Of making decisions that preserve life rather than destroy it?" Before Marcus could respond, a sudden commotion erupted at the garden's edge. Palace guards appeared, their weapons drawn, surrounding a group of intruders who had breached the perimeter. In an instant, Marcus's demeanor transformed. His body tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm as he positioned himself protectively in front of Elira. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice now cold and commanding. The contrast between his earlier vulnerability and this sudden display of warrior instinct sent a shiver down Elira's spine. "No," she responded firmly, stepping forward to stand beside him. "This is my home, Captain. If you wish to protect me, then trust that I am capable of defending myself." With a wave of her hand, crystalline barriers emerged from the ground, encircling them and the intruders in a dome of protective energy. The standoff lasted mere moments before palace security overwhelmed the intruders, but those brief seconds changed everything. When the danger passed, Marcus turned to Aelira, his expression unreadable. "You're right," he said quietly. "I underestimated you, and for that, I'm sorry. But tell me, Princess, when push comes to shove, which version of me will you remember? The man who seeks understanding, or the warrior who reacts without hesitation?" Aelira opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, she turned and fled back toward the palace, leaving Marcus alone in the glowing garden, surrounded by the aftermath of their confrontation and the unanswered questions hanging heavy in the air between them. The days following their garden encounter became a maelstrom of conflicting emotions for Aelira. Each morning, she would awaken with Marcus's question echoing in her mind. Which version of him would she remember? The answer eluded her, buried beneath layers of duty and fear. Her attendants noted her distraction during court proceedings, the way her silver hair seemed less radiant, her movements less fluid. Even her father, Emperor Zorvith, had begun to notice the change in his daughter. During private meditation sessions in the palace's sanctum, Aelira found herself unable to achieve the mental clarity that usually came so easily. Instead, visions of Marcus's dual nature haunted her consciousness. The compassionate negotiator who sought understanding, and the ruthless warrior who acted without hesitation. These images merged and twisted in her mind's eye, creating a kaleidoscope of uncertainty that left her questioning everything she thought she knew about leadership and protection. Her internal conflict manifested physically as well. Meals tasted bland, and sleep became elusive, filled with dreams where crystalline barriers shattered under relentless assault. During diplomatic sessions, she caught herself watching Marcus with new eyes, analyzing every gesture, every word, searching for clues about his true nature. Was he the protector who had shielded her in the garden, or the destroyer whose reputation preceded him? The weight of her position pressed heavier than ever before. As a princess of Zorathia, she was expected to embody the perfect balance between strength and compassion, to lead her people with unwavering certainty. Yet Marcus's presence had introduced doubt into her carefully ordered world. She found herself questioning whether her own approach to leadership, always prioritizing peace over conflict, was truly the most effective path. Perhaps there were times when ruthlessness was necessary, when hesitation could cost lives. These thoughts led to deeper introspection about her own capabilities. Had she become too sheltered in her role as princess? Too reliant on the crystalline technology that had always protected her people? Marcus's instinctive reaction in the garden, his readiness to act without waiting for technological solutions, suggested a different kind of strength, one born from experience and necessity rather than privilege and tradition. Her attendants grew increasingly concerned as they witnessed her withdrawal from social functions and ceremonial duties. Lady Viral, her closest confidant, attempted to draw her out during their daily walks through the palace gardens. "Your Highness, you seem troubled. Is there something weighing on your mind that you wish to share?" Aelira would smile and dismiss the concern, but inwardly, she longed to confide in someone about the storm raging within her. The pressure mounted as preparations for the upcoming Unity Festival intensified, a celebration meant to symbolize the growing bond between Zorathians and humans. The irony wasn't lost on her. How could she celebrate unity when she felt so fundamentally divided? At night, when the palace grew quiet and the crystalline spires pulsed with gentle light, Aelira would stand at her balcony, gazing out at the stars. She wondered if Marcus lay awake too, wrestling with his own demons. Did he understand the chaos he had unleashed within her? Or was he simply another soldier, moving from mission to mission, leaving disruption in his wake without considering the consequences? The breaking point came during a private audience with her father. Emperor Zorvith, sensing his daughter's distress, had summoned her to the Hall of Reflections, a chamber designed to amplify truth and clarity. As they sat amidst the resonating crystals, Aelira found herself blurting out her fears and doubts, her words tumbling forth in an uncharacteristic display of vulnerability. "Father, I find myself questioning everything," she confessed, her voice trembling. "This human warrior, this Captain Drake, he challenges everything I believe about leadership and protection. His presence here, his effect on me, it's like a virus infecting the very core of who I am." Emperor Zorvith listened patiently, his ancient eyes reflecting centuries of wisdom. When she finished, he placed a gentle hand on hers. "My dear child, growth often feels like destruction. Perhaps this human warrior has come into your life not to tear down your beliefs, but to help you build something stronger, something that incorporates both compassion and strength." His words offered little comfort. Instead, they ignited a spark of rebellion within her. How could her father, who had always preached the virtues of peaceful resolution, suggest embracing elements of Marcus's warrior nature? The contradiction tore at her already frayed nerves, leaving her more confused than ever. As the days passed, Aelira found herself avoiding Marcus, using her royal duties as an excuse to minimize their interactions. Yet even in his absence, his influence permeated her thoughts, coloring every decision, every judgment. The palace itself seemed to echo with his presence, the crystalline walls reflecting memories of their encounters in distorted patterns of light. The grand ballroom of the Zorathian palace shimmered with anticipation as preparations for the Unity Festival reached their peak. Servants moved with practiced precision, arranging crystalline decorations that pulsed with synchronized light patterns. The air hummed with excitement and underlying tension, as if the very atmosphere recognized the significance of the evening to come. Aelira stood at the balcony overlooking the preparations, her heart pounding with a mixture of dread and determination. Below her, Marcus moved through the crowd of diplomats and dignitaries, his presence commanding attention without effort. He had shed his military uniform for formal attire, yet the warrior within remained evident in his posture, in the way his eyes constantly scanned the room. Their gazes met across the distance, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The connection between them crackled with unspoken words and unresolved tensions, visible to anyone who cared to look closely. Aelira descended the spiral staircase, each step measured and deliberate, her silvery gown flowing like liquid starlight around her. The gathered crowd parted respectfully, creating a path that led directly to Marcus. As she approached, she could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes upon them, each pair speculating about the nature of their relationship. The pressure mounted with every step, threatening to crush her resolve. "My lady," Marcus greeted her, his voice low and respectful, yet carrying an undercurrent of something more primal. He extended his hand, palm up, in the traditional Zorathian gesture of equality. After a moment's hesitation, Aelira placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth of his touch through her delicate gloves. The opening ceremony commenced, with speeches and performances celebrating the growing bond between their peoples. Yet throughout the formalities, Aelira's mind raced with calculations and contingencies. She had spent hours preparing for this moment, rehearsing every possible scenario, yet nothing could have prepared her for the raw intensity of Marcus's presence beside her. As the evening progressed, their roles required them to mingle separately, engaging with various dignitaries and guests. Yet fate seemed determined to bring them together repeatedly. At one point, they found themselves trapped in a corner of the ballroom during a particularly enthusiastic performance by the palace orchestra. The music swelled around them, a complex arrangement of traditional Zorathian melodies blended with human compositions. "You look beautiful tonight," Marcus murmured, his voice barely audible over the music. "But I sense there's something you're not telling me." Aelira's grip tightened on her crystal goblet. "Captain, this is neither the time nor the place for such discussions." "Isn't it?" Marcus countered, his eyes scanning the room. "With everyone watching, waiting to see how this situation develops? Your Highness, I've been a soldier long enough to recognize when I'm being maneuvered into position." The accusation struck home, and Aelira felt her carefully constructed facade begin to crack. "You think this is some sort of strategic placement? That I would use my own people's celebration as a chessboard?" "I think you're doing what you believe is best for your people," Marcus replied, his tone softening. "Just as I would do anything to protect mine. But I also think you're afraid of what might happen if you let yourself trust me, really trust me." The music reached a crescendo, masking their heated exchange from nearby guests. Aelira took a step back, her royal training kicking in to maintain proper distance. "You speak of trust, yet your actions in the garden proved otherwise. You reacted with violence when diplomacy might have sufficed. And you would have had us stand there, exposed and vulnerable, while unknown threats approached?" Marcus challenged, his voice rising slightly. "Forgive me, Your Highness, But sometimes protection requires immediate action, not committee-approved responses. Their argument drew curious glances from nearby guests, forcing them to lower their voices. Alira felt trapped between her public role and private turmoil, each word from Marcus striking deeper than she cared to admit. The festival continued around them, oblivious to the emotional storm brewing between the princess and the warrior. Suddenly, the lights dimmed as part of the planned entertainment, plunging the ballroom into semi-darkness illuminated only by the pulsating crystals. In that moment of reduced visibility, Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Tell me, princess, when you look at me, what do you see? A threat to your people's way of life? Or someone who might understand the burden you carry?" Alira opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, the lights returned, bathing them in brilliant illumination. The moment passed, leaving them standing close together, their breathing synchronized, their hearts racing in unison. Around them, the festival continued, but the space between them had irrevocably changed, charged with possibilities neither was ready to confront. The aftermath of their confrontation in the ballroom hung heavy in the air as the Unity Festival drew to a close. Guests departed with knowing smiles and speculative whispers, while palace staff began the meticulous process of clearing away the remnants of celebration. Alira retreated to her private chambers, her mind racing with Marcus's final question and the implications it carried. The crystalline walls of her sanctuary seemed to pulse in time with her agitated thoughts, their usual calming properties failing to soothe her troubled spirit. In the adjacent wing, Marcus paced his quarters, replaying every interaction with the alien princess. His military training had prepared him for countless scenarios, but nothing could have equipped him for the emotional complexity of this mission. The woman who had captured his attention defied every expectation. She was simultaneously strong and vulnerable, commanding and uncertain. Most troubling was the realization that his usual tactics of direct confrontation and calculated strategy seemed ineffective against her intricate dance of protocol and emotion. The palace itself seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the next move in this cosmic game of diplomacy and desire. Corridors that had witnessed centuries of royal history now bore silent witness to the unfolding drama between two beings from different worlds. Servants exchanged meaningful glances as they went about their duties, their gossip networks buzzing with speculation about the princess's withdrawn behavior and the human captain's restless pacing. Alira's attendants grew increasingly concerned as they prepared her for bed. Lady Viral, noticing the princess's trembling hands as she removed her jewelry, ventured a tentative question. "Your Highness, is everything all right? You seem unsettled." "I'm fine," Alira responded automatically, though her reflection in the mirror told a different story. Dark circles had formed beneath her luminous eyes, and her usually radiant complexion appeared pale. "It's just the pressures of statecraft. Nothing more." Lady Viral hesitated, then placed a comforting hand on Alira's shoulder. "If I may be so bold, Your Highness, sometimes the greatest pressures come not from matters of state, but from matters of the heart." The comment struck a nerve, and Alira turned sharply. "Do not presume to understand my situation, Viral. Matters of the heart have no place in affairs of state." Yet even as she spoke, she knew the words rang hollow. Her heart had become deeply entangled in the political web surrounding her, and extracting herself seemed impossible without causing damage to everything she held dear. Meanwhile, Marcus wrestled with his own demons. The warrior who had faced countless battles without hesitation now found himself paralyzed by uncertainty. His communicator lay untouched on the bedside table, messages from Earth's command awaiting his response. Normally, he would have filed detailed reports about his progress, but how could he explain the complex emotions swirling within him? How could he articulate the way Alira's presence both attracted and repelled him, like opposite poles of a magnet caught in an eternal dance? The palace's ancient AI system, designed to monitor and maintain harmony within the royal residence, detected the heightened emotional states of both individuals. Subtle adjustments were made to environmental controls, temperature, lighting, even the ambient music played in their respective wings, in an attempt to restore balance. Yet these technological interventions proved powerless against the storm of emotions that raged within the princess and the warrior. As midnight approached, Alira found herself drawn to the palace archives, a vast repository of knowledge that housed records of every significant event in Zorathian history. She wandered among the crystalline data cores, her fingers trailing over their smooth surfaces as she searched for answers in the past. Perhaps somewhere in the annals of her people's history lay guidance for navigating this unprecedented situation. Marcus, unable to sleep, found himself exploring the palace's observation deck. The panoramic view of Zarathia's night sky offered little comfort, the stars seeming colder and more distant than ever before. He activated the deck's telescope system, zooming in on Earth's position in the distant solar system. The sight of his home planet, reduced to a mere speck of light, filled him with both longing and determination. He had come too far, sacrificed too much, to let fear and uncertainty dictate his actions now. Back in the archives, Aelira discovered something unexpected. Records of previous attempts at interspecies alliances, some successful, others disastrous. One particular entry caught her attention, a cautionary tale about a Zarathian prince who had fallen in love with a warrior from a neighboring system. The account described how their inability to reconcile their differing approaches to conflict resolution had ultimately led to tragedy. The parallels to her current situation were impossible to ignore. As dawn approached, both Aelira and Marcus found themselves gravitating toward the palace gardens, the site of their previous confrontation. Neither was aware of the other's presence until they nearly collided on one of the crystalline pathways. The surprise of their meeting shattered the fragile control they had each managed to maintain throughout the night. "Princess," Marcus began, his voice rough from lack of sleep. "We need to talk." Aelira nodded, her own exhaustion evident in the slight tremor of her hands. "Yes, Captain. We do. But not here. Not now." She gestured toward the palace, indicating a need for privacy and proper protocol. Marcus's frustration boiled over. "Protocol be damned, Your Highness. We've danced around this long enough. Your people watch us, my people watch us, and still we hide behind formalities while the real issues remain unaddressed." The harshness of his words cut through Aelira's remaining defenses. "And what would you have me do, Captain? Abandon centuries of tradition? Risk everything my family has built for the sake of... what exactly?" "For the sake of truth," Marcus shot back, his voice rising. "For acknowledging that whatever exists between us goes beyond politics and diplomacy. For facing the fact that we're both caught in something neither of us fully understands, yet neither can escape." Their raised voices attracted the attention of nearby guards, who moved to intervene. Aelira raised a hand to stop them, her expression torn between anger and something deeper, more vulnerable. "Enough," she whispered, though the word carried the weight of command. "Enough of this madness." Marcus took a step closer, heedless of protocol or consequence. "Madness? Is that what you call it? Because from where I stand, it looks more like destiny. Like two people brought together by forces beyond our control, forced to confront everything they thought they knew about themselves and their worlds." The sun began to rise, casting golden light across the garden and illuminating the tears that had begun to form in Aelira's eyes. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking. "Father, please have mercy on me. This human warrior is ruthless." Her words hung in the air, incomplete yet heavy with meaning. Marcus froze, his expression shifting from anger to something more complex. Understanding, perhaps, or maybe just the beginning of acceptance that their journey was far from over. "But he is also more than his reputation," Aelira continued, her voice trembling yet resolute. Marcus stepped back, his face softening as he realized the depth of her internal struggle. "Princess," he said gently, "I won't force you into anything. But know this, I'm not the man I was when I arrived here." The rising sun bathed them in light, its warmth seeming to dissolve some of the tension between them. Aelira looked at him, her heart torn between duty and desire. "Perhaps," she whispered, "there is a path where strength and compassion coexist, not just in one of us, but in both." Marcus nodded, understanding that their story was only beginning, not ending. Together, they turned toward the palace, ready to face whatever came next, together or apart. And as they walked, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, bearing witness to the fragile hope taking root in two hearts from different worlds.